The first time she looked at me, really looked, it was like she was trying to remember something, not about me, but about herself. Something she'd buried a long time ago. It wasn't supposed to be anything more than a moment. She was leaning against the counter in that quiet cafe near the end of town, the one that always smelled faintly of roasted almonds and rain-soaked wood. I was there because my laptop had died, and she was there because, well, she never said. She just sat there every Thursday, her hands wrapped around a cup she never finished, eyes scanning a book she rarely turned the page on. That afternoon, I took the seat across from her, not by plan, but because it was the only one near an outlet. At least, that's what I told myself. When she glanced up, the air seemed to shift. Her eyes weren't bright or polished, they were soft, the kind that carried years. She smiled, just slightly, as if she could see through the polite excuses I hadn't even said yet. "You can sit," she murmured. Her voice was low, like velvet worn at the edges. I nodded, though my throat had gone dry. For a while, the only sound between us was the faint hum of the espresso machine and the rain beginning to tap against the window. I typed, or pretended to. She turned a page, finally. Then her phone buzzed, and she flinched. It wasn't loud, but her hand lingered over the screen for too long before she turned it face down again. "You ever notice," she said suddenly, her gaze still on the window, "how silence gets heavier when you try not to break it?" I didn't know what to say, so I just watched her reflection, the curve of her shoulder, the faint tremor in her fingers before she wrapped them around her cup again. "I do," I said quietly. That made her glance at me again. Longer this time. It wasn't attraction, not at first. It was something quieter, like recognition. She seemed surprised by it, too. When she finally laughed, it was soft, but it carried something unspoken, like she hadn't expected me to answer at all. "You're younger than I thought," she said, not as an insult but as an observation. "Does that bother you?" Her eyes drifted back to her cup. "No. But it should." A small silence followed. I should have looked away, gone back to my screen, but I didn't. The space between us began to hum with something fragile, something I didn't have the words for yet. When her hand brushed mine, accidentally, maybe, I felt it like static, the kind that stays under your skin long after the touch is gone. She didn't pull away immediately. Neither did I. The cafe felt warmer all of a sudden. Or maybe it was just her. Outside, the rain had thickened. Drops ran down the glass, catching the dim streetlight and splitting it into gold fragments that flickered across her face. She looked at me again, this time with a kind of weary curiosity, like she was trying to decide whether to lean into something she'd already lost once. "You should probably get back to work," she said softly. "Probably," I echoed, but I didn't move. Her lips curved, not quite a smile, more like a warning wrapped in kindness. "You don't know what you're doing," she whispered. "No," I said. "But I think I want to." For a moment, her expression faltered, like I'd touched a place she kept carefully sealed. The air between us felt too thin, like one wrong breath could break it. Then the bell over the cafe door chimed. A man's voice called her name, low, familiar, tired. She turned her head slowly. And in that split second, before she stood, she looked back at me, and the look said everything the words couldn't. "Don't follow me." But I already knew I would, that I didn't expect to see her again. But a week later, she was there, same cafe, same seat by the window, same half-finished cup. This time, she noticed me first. Her gaze flicked up briefly, lingered, then softened like she'd been caught remembering something she wasn't supposed to. "You again," she said with that half-smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Guess I'm a creature of habit," I replied, pretending I didn't plan this. She set her book down. "Or maybe you just like the view." I should have laughed. Instead, I met her gaze and said, "Maybe." Her silence stretched between us, not cold, just cautious. She wore it like armor, the kind that looked too heavy to take off anymore. The conversation came slow, unhurried. She told me she used to work in publishing, that she hadn't picked up a manuscript in 2 years. Words started to feel dishonest, she said. People, too. I didn't press, but I caught the way her thumb brushed the inside of her wrist as she spoke. A habit, maybe, or a memory. I wondered who had left that kind of mark on her. When I told her I was a photographer, her expression shifted, curious, then guarded again. You capture what you can't keep, she said quietly. That's dangerous. Only if you start wanting to, I replied. Her eyes lifted then, and for a heartbeat, I thought she might say something, but she didn't. She just stared at me like she was trying to decide if I was naive or sincere. Maybe both. The rain started again outside. It always did when we met. At one point, I leaned forward to plug in my charger, and my shoulder brushed hers. It wasn't much, just the soft graze of fabric against fabric, but I felt her freeze for a second. She didn't pull away. Her perfume was faint, something like amber and cedar, the kind that lingers in memory more than air. You shouldn't look at me like that, she murmured without meeting my eyes. How am I looking? Like you don't know what happens next. She finally turned to face me, her breath close enough that I could feel its warmth when she exhaled. My pulse stuttered. Her eyes searched mine, waiting for me to flinch or back away. I didn't. Do you? I asked. Her lips parted, a small intake of breath, then a shake of the head. No. That's the problem. We sat there, caught in a silence that felt almost alive. Every sound, the scrape of a chair, the hiss of the coffee machine, faded until it was just her and me and the small, dangerous space between us. A drop of rain slipped down the window, slow and unbroken, and she watched it like it offered an answer. Then, quietly, she said, "You remind me of someone I used to believe in." I wanted to ask who. I wanted to ask why she stopped. Instead, I just said, "Maybe you should try again." Her hand trembled when it reached for her cup, so slightly, most people wouldn't notice. But I did. I reached out before I could stop myself, steadying it. Our fingers touched, warm, hesitant, real. She didn't move away this time. When she finally spoke, it was barely a whisper. "You really don't know what you're doing to me." I smiled, but my voice came out quieter than I meant. "Maybe I do." Her breath caught, and then she laughed, low and broken, before looking down. "God help us," she said. But she didn't let go. The cafe had started to feel like a secret. A quiet, steady rhythm only we knew the steps to. But that afternoon, everything was off. She looked restless, tapping her fingers against her cup, her eyes flicking toward the door every few minutes. Her hair was pinned up carelessly, as though she hadn't planned to stay long. "You're late," she said when I walked in, though she hadn't asked me to come. I smiled. "You were waiting." Her lips pressed into a line, but her eyes gave her away. "Don't flatter yourself." She said it lightly, but her voice carried a thin tremor, the kind that comes from wanting to sound fine when you're anything but. We talked about nothing. Weather. Work. How the coffee had gotten worse lately. But under every word was something unsaid, sharp and insistent. Then her phone buzzed again. Same as before. She glanced down, face tightening. A name flashed, Ethan, before she turned the screen over. Her ex, maybe. Or someone she hadn't yet stopped answering to. I shouldn't have asked, but I did. You don't have to pretend you don't see it. She looked up slowly. And what do I pretend it means? That you don't wish you were somewhere else. Her eyes softened. If I did, I wouldn't be here. The silence that followed was too fragile to touch. She reached for the sugar packet, and our hands brushed. The contact was brief, accidental, but it burned like confession. Her fingers froze halfway through the motion. Neither of us spoke. And then, just when the quiet grew heavy enough to break, the bell over the cafe door rang. A voice, cheerful, oblivious, called my name. "Hey. Man, didn't think I'd find you here." It was Leo, a friend from work. I hadn't told him about her, hadn't told anyone. He looked between us, curious, too perceptive for comfort. Didn't mean to interrupt. You on a date or something? She stiffened immediately, withdrawing her hand as if burned. Just talking, I said too quickly. Leo grinned. Right. Talking. Her smile was practiced, polite, the kind you use when you're trying not to exist. When he finally left, the air between us was no longer gentle. It was charged, tight with something raw and unspoken. You shouldn't have to lie, she said quietly. I didn't. Her gaze lifted to mine, searching, wounded, defiant. Then what are we doing? I wanted to answer, but the words tangled somewhere behind my ribs. Instead, I reached out, slowly, and touched her wrist. She didn't pull away. Her pulse fluttered under my fingers, fast and uneven. Our faces were close enough now that I could see the faintest scar beneath her jaw, a small white line like a secret she'd carried for years. Her breath hitched. This isn't, she began, but the rest got lost in the air between us. Then stop me, I whispered. She didn't. For a heartbeat, everything held, the hum of the lights, the rain against the glass, the taste of almost on my tongue. Her lips parted, her eyes flicked to my mouth, and then a sound shattered it. Her phone again. Vibrating hard against the table. She jerked back as if waking from a dream. I should go, she said, voice barely steady. I caught her hand before she could. She froze. Our eyes met, neither of us speaking, both too far gone to pretend it meant nothing. You don't make this easy, she whispered. You don't either. She laughed, soft, pained, and pulled her hand free. But as she turned toward the door, she stopped, just for a moment, and looked back. And in that look, raw, desperate, afraid, I knew the distance between us wouldn't last much longer. It happened on a Thursday again, the same day everything between us always seemed to shift. She didn't text, didn't say she'd be there, but when I walked into the cafe, she was already waiting. No book, no coffee this time. Just her, sitting still, her hands folded tightly in her lap like she was holding something fragile inside herself. When she looked up, her smile was wrong, too calm, too practiced. You shouldn't keep coming here, she said before I'd even sat down. Then tell me to stop. Her throat worked, but no words came. She glanced at the window, then back at me. You don't understand how this looks. I don't care how it looks. That's because you haven't lived long enough to regret things yet. Her voice trembled on regret. It wasn't condescension, it was fear. I leaned closer. So you do regret it? Her eyes flicked up, wide, unguarded. I regret feeling anything at all, she whispered. It landed like a confession and a plea in one. I wanted to say something, anything, but her hand reached across the table first, barely touching mine. The contact was electric, too much, too honest. I've made mistakes before, she said softly. You don't deserve to be one of them. I turned my hand, fingers brushing the inside of her wrist, the same spot I'd seen her touch before when she was nervous. Her pulse jumped. Maybe it's not a mistake, I said. She exhaled shakily, her other hand lifting, hovering in the air like she might push me away, or pull me closer. Don't, she breathed. Then say it. Her eyes met mine, defiant and terrified. You're a boy, and I'm old enough to know better. The words were sharp, but her voice broke halfway through. I stood, slowly, walked around the table. She didn't move, just sat there, her breathing shallow, her eyes following me like she couldn't decide which way to run. When I reached her, I stopped close enough to feel the warmth radiating from her skin. You think that's all I see? I asked quietly. She shook her head, almost imperceptibly. You should go. Tell me to. Her jaw tightened. Don't make me. I did anyway, one step closer, close enough to smell the faint trace of her perfume, to see the tremor in her hand as she reached up, almost absently, to tuck a strand of hair behind her ear. My fingers brushed hers before I could stop myself. She froze. Then, without looking away, she said, "You don't know what you're asking for." "I think I do." Her breath hitched, quick, sharp, as if something inside her cracked open. She rose from her chair slowly, every movement deliberate, restrained. The room around us disappeared, no voices, no sound, just the thud of my heartbeat and the shallow rhythm of hers. When she stepped closer, the air between us thinned to nothing. I could feel the warmth of her breath near my cheek, the tremor in her fingers when they brushed against my collar. "You should hate me for this," she whispered. "I can't." Her hand slid up, lightly tracing the side of my jaw, hesitant at first, then firmer, her thumb catching against my lower lip. The world stopped moving. We stood there, suspended between sense and surrender. Her eyes softened, all defenses gone, and for a moment, one brief, dangerous heartbeat, she leaned in. Then the cafe lights flickered. A voice from the counter called her name. She pulled back like waking from a dream, her breath uneven, her eyes glassy. "I can't do this," she said, but she didn't move away completely. I reached for her hand. "Then why are you still here?" Her lips parted, no words, only silence, and the weight of everything we hadn't said hung between us. The space left was small enough for one more breath. One more heartbeat. One more chance. Before everything changed, she didn't come to the cafe for a week. No messages, no sign of her usual quiet spot by the window. Just absence, thick and unfamiliar. I told myself not to care, that I was imagining something that wasn't mine to want. But by the 6th day, I went looking anyway. I found her outside instead, not in the cafe, but on the street just past the bookstore. She was standing near a man. Mid-40s. Crisp shirt, polished watch, that quiet authority people wear when they've already won too many arguments. He was talking. She wasn't. When she finally noticed me across the street, her expression faltered, one flicker of something between guilt and surprise, then she looked away. I should have kept walking. But I didn't. When she turned up at the cafe again the next evening, she looked different. Tired. Defeated, almost. Her hair was loose, her lipstick faintly smudged, as though she'd been in a hurry to come and not sure why. "You shouldn't be here," she said quietly when I sat across from her. "You said that before. This time I mean it." She wouldn't look at me, just kept tracing the rim of her cup with a fingertip. I could see her hand trembling. "Who was he?" I asked. She froze. "No one that matters anymore." "Then why did you look like you couldn't breathe when you saw me?" Her eyes lifted, sharp and wounded. "Because he's my ex-husband," she said. "And because he still thinks he has the right to ask who I spend time with." I leaned back, trying to make sense of the quiet ache in her tone. "So what happens if he finds out?" Her lips curved, not a smile, but something closer to resignation. "He already did." The words landed like a punch. "He came by the cafe last week," she continued, voice trembling but steady. "He saw us. He didn't say much. Just looked at me the way he used to, like I'd broken something only he owned." She let out a long breath. "He told me I was humiliating myself. That I was desperate. That you were just..." "Stop," I said, too quickly, too harshly. She looked up. Her eyes were glassy now, but her chin stayed high. "He's not entirely wrong, is he?" My throat went tight. "You don't believe that." "Don't I?" she whispered. "You're young, and I'm not. I've built my life on silence, on pretending not to want things that only end up hurting me." Her voice cracked then, barely audible, but it made my chest tighten. I reached out before I could stop myself, brushing my fingers against hers. "You think I'm a mistake," I said quietly. "But you came back." She didn't pull away this time. Her hand stayed beneath mine, trembling. "I don't know what I came for," she said. "Yes, you do." Her eyes lifted to mine again, searching, desperate. Then, without meaning to, she whispered, "He said I'd find someone to make me feel young again." I swallowed hard. "And did you?" Her lips parted, no sound, just breath. "I don't feel young," she said. "I just feel alive." The silence that followed felt dangerous, too heavy, too honest. Outside, thunder rolled low in the distance. Inside, her hand turned over in mine, slowly, deliberately. Her fingers interlaced with mine. For the first time, she didn't look away. And in that stillness, her breath shaky, my pulse unsteady, something irreversible began to take shape. She exhaled, voice breaking into a whisper. "Then I suppose I've already chosen." And though no one had moved yet, we both knew what would happen next. That it was raining again. Harder than before, the kind of rain that made the city blur into a watercolor of lights and shadows. She'd asked me to meet her somewhere different this time. Not the cafe. Her apartment. I told myself not to expect anything, but my heart didn't listen. When she opened the door, she looked like she hadn't slept. Her sweater hung loose on one shoulder, her hair damp from the walk to the door. No makeup, no defenses. Just her, the real her. "Come in," she said softly. The room was warm, the kind of quiet that made you aware of every small sound, the drip of rain against the glass, the hum of the heater, the rhythm of her breath when I stepped closer. She poured 2 glasses of wine and handed me one, her fingers brushing mine. That single touch was enough to make everything else fall away. "I shouldn't have called you," she said, staring into her glass. "I know," I said. "But I came anyway." She smiled faintly. "You always do." I wanted to answer, but she looked up, and whatever I'd meant to say vanished. Her eyes were different tonight. Not guarded. Not ashamed. Just tired of pretending. "Why do you keep coming back?" she asked. "Because when I'm with you, everything else feels quiet." She blinked slowly, then set her glass down. The air shifted, denser somehow, charged with something we'd been trying to avoid for too long. "I told myself I wouldn't cross this line," she said, stepping closer. "That I'd stop before it became something I couldn't control. And now?" She exhaled, her breath trembling. "Now I don't know if I want to stop." Her hand lifted, tentative, uncertain, and brushed the side of my face. Her fingers lingered, tracing the line of my jaw as though she were memorizing something she shouldn't. I caught her hand, holding it there against my skin. The silence between us grew heavy, every heartbeat a question neither of us wanted to answer. "I'm not here to save you," I said quietly. "I don't need saving." "I know." She took another step forward, and now we were close enough that I could feel the warmth of her body through the space between us, barely an inch, maybe less. Her eyes dropped to my mouth, then flicked back up. "This isn't fair," she whispered. "No," I said. "It's not." She hesitated, caught in the space between resistance and surrender. Her breath brushed against my neck, soft and unsteady. "I've spent years pretending I don't need anyone," she said. "And then you walked in like you knew exactly where to find the cracks." I swallowed hard. Maybe they were already there. She smiled, small, sad, beautiful, and in that moment, everything that had been unsaid finally existed between us. We didn't move, but something inside both of us did, the part that had been holding on too tightly to reason. Her hand slipped from my face to my shoulder, then to the back of my neck, her fingers trembling. My breath caught. The distance between us disappeared. Not a kiss. Not yet. Just the nearness, raw, human, unsteady, of 2 people who had finally stopped pretending they didn't feel what they felt. She closed her eyes. "If we do this," she whispered, "nothing will be the same." "Then let it change," I said. For a long moment, neither of us moved. The rain outside softened, like even the world was holding its breath. And when she finally leaned in, her forehead resting against mine, her hand tangled in my shirt, we both knew that the decision had already been made. No promises. No lies. Just truth, messy, fragile, and entirely ours. Morning came quietly. No grand speeches. No fireworks. Just soft light slipping through the blinds, catching the edge of her hair where it rested on my arm. The storm had stopped sometime during the night, but the world outside still felt washed clean, as if everything had been reset, including us. She stirred first, half asleep, fingers tracing lazy shapes against my wrist. There was something achingly ordinary about the moment, two people sharing the same small silence, the same warmth. When she finally looked up, there was no panic in her eyes. No regret. Only something calm and real. "You're still here," she murmured. I smiled. "You sound surprised." "I am," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "I thought maybe you'd realize this was a mistake." I shook my head slowly. "Last night didn't feel like one." Her gaze softened, that look she gave when she was trying not to let her heart show too much. She reached out, brushing a strand of hair from my forehead, her touch feather light. "I used to think wanting someone younger made me foolish," she said. "That it meant I was chasing something I should have outgrown. And now?" She hesitated, then smiled faintly. "Now I think maybe I was just waiting for someone who made me feel alive again." The words hung between us, not heavy, not uncertain, just true. I sat up a little, resting against the headboard. She followed, wrapping the blanket around her shoulders, the morning light catching her collarbone, her bare honesty. "I don't know where this goes," I said quietly. "But I don't want to pretend it didn't happen." Her hand found mine, fingers intertwining like it was the most natural thing in the world. "Then don't," she said. "Let's stop thinking about what it should be and just let it be." The simplicity of it disarmed me. After all the tension, the hesitation, the wanting and not wanting, it was this quiet acceptance that felt the most intimate. We sat like that for a long time, the kind of silence that doesn't need filling. Her thumb brushed across my knuckles, and I could feel the steady rhythm of her breathing against my side. Outside, the rain had left everything gleaming, the rooftops, the windows, even the air. She leaned into me then, resting her head on my shoulder, her voice soft. "Do you think people like us ever stop being afraid?" I thought about it, then shook my head. "No. But maybe that's how you know it's real." Her laugh, quiet, a little sad, a little hopeful, was the only sound for a while. When she finally turned to face me, she didn't speak. She just kissed me once, slow and certain, like a promise that didn't need to be spoken aloud. No rush. No pretending. Just two people, finally choosing each other. And in that still morning light, everything that had been uncertain finally made sense. It wasn't about age. Or rules. Or what anyone else might think. It was about us. And for the first time, that was enough. Did you enjoy the story? What kind of stories would you like to hear next?